What if I told you that the most powerful empire in history was brought to its knees not by armies or invaders, but by one woman? That the fate of Rome, the eternal city, was sealed not on a battlefield but in a bedchamber in Alexandria. For centuries, historians have portrayed her as a seductress who used her beauty to manipulate powerful men. But the truth about Cleopatra is far more shocking and far more significant than the legend suggests. Today we're going to reveal how this Egyptian queen didn't just captivate two of Rome's most powerful men, but fundamentally altered the course of Western civilization. Cleopatra VII Philopator, the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic Kingdom of Egypt, is one of history's most fascinating and misunderstood figures. Born in 69 BCE, she ascended to the throne at just 18 years old, ruling Egypt for 21 years until her death in 30 BCE. But Cleopatra was no typical monarch. She was a brilliant strategist, a cunning diplomat, and a visionary leader who spoke 9 languages and was educated in mathematics, philosophy, oratory, and politics. When we think of Cleopatra, we often picture Elizabeth Taylor's glamorous portrayal in the 1963 film, a seductive beauty who used her charms to ensnare Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. But this image, while captivating, barely scratches the surface of who Cleopatra really was and what she accomplished. The truth is that Cleopatra was far more than a seductress. She was a formidable political operator who understood power in a way few of her contemporaries did. At a time when Rome was extending its influence across the Mediterranean, Cleopatra recognized that Egypt's survival depended on skillful diplomacy and strategic alliances, and she was willing to do whatever it took to secure her kingdom's future. Cleopatra's relationships with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony were not mere love affairs. They were carefully calculated political moves designed to preserve Egypt's independence and expand its influence. And while these relationships ultimately failed to achieve their immediate goal, they had unintended consequences that fundamentally altered the course of Roman history. By the end of Cleopatra's life, the Roman Republic had fallen, replaced by the Roman Empire under Augustus Caesar. The traditional Roman values of republicanism and civic virtue had given way to imperial autocracy. And while Cleopatra didn't live to see it, her actions had played a crucial role in this transformation. In this video, we'll explore the real Cleopatra, not the seductress of legend, but the brilliant strategist who understood power better than most. We'll examine how her relationships with Caesar and Antony were not mere affairs of the heart, but carefully calculated political moves that ultimately changed the course of Western civilization. And we'll reveal the shocking truth about how one woman's ambition and intelligence contributed to the fall of the Roman Republic and the rise of the Roman Empire. To understand Cleopatra's impact on Rome, we first need to understand the world she inhabited. By the time Cleopatra ascended to the Egyptian throne in 51 BCE, Rome had become the dominant power in the Mediterranean. The Roman Republic, with its formidable military and efficient administration, had conquered Greece, Carthage, and much of the Near East. Egypt, with its wealth and strategic location, was one of the few remaining independent kingdoms. Egypt under the Ptolemies was a shadow of its former glory. Once the most powerful kingdom in the ancient world, it was now a client state of Rome, its independence maintained only by Rome's willingness to allow it. The Ptolemaic court was rife with intrigue, betrayal, and violence. Cleopatra's own father, Ptolemy XII, had been restored to power by Roman legions after being deposed, leaving Egypt deeply in debt to Rome. Cleopatra inherited this precarious situation at just 18 years old. She was the eldest daughter of Ptolemy XII, and according to Egyptian tradition, she was supposed to rule jointly with her younger brother Ptolemy XIII, whom she also married, as was customary in the Ptolemaic dynasty. But Cleopatra had no intention of sharing power. Unlike her predecessors, Cleopatra embraced Egyptian culture and language. She was the first Ptolemaic ruler to learn Egyptian, in addition to the Greek spoken by the court. She presented herself as the reincarnation of the Egyptian goddess Isis, using religion to legitimize her rule. These actions endeared her to the Egyptian people, giving her a power base that her brother lacked. But Cleopatra's position was precarious. 3 years into her reign, she was forced into exile by a coalition led by her brother Ptolemy XIII and their powerful advisors. It was at this critical moment that Julius Caesar arrived in Alexandria in pursuit of Pompey, his rival in the Roman Civil War. What happened next would change the course of history. Cleopatra, recognizing an opportunity, smuggled herself into Caesar's presence hidden in a carpet. According to Plutarch, she was carried into the palace rolled up in a bed sack or carpet, and when unrolled before Caesar, she made an immediate impression. Caesar was captivated, not just by Cleopatra's beauty, but by her intelligence, wit, and political acumen. He saw in her not just a beautiful woman, but a capable ruler who could be a valuable ally. For Cleopatra, Caesar represented an opportunity to secure her throne and protect Egypt from Roman domination. Their relationship was mutually beneficial from the start. Caesar restored Cleopatra to the throne as joint ruler with her younger brother, though it was clear that Cleopatra would hold the real power. In return, Cleopatra provided Caesar with the wealth and support he needed to continue his campaigns. But their relationship went beyond mere political convenience. Cleopatra bore Caesar a son, Ptolemy Caesarion, whom she believed was Caesar's heir. This child represented the union of Egypt and Rome, a potential new dynasty that could dominate the Mediterranean world. Caesar's time in Egypt was brief but significant. He was called back to Rome to deal with political matters, leaving Cleopatra pregnant with his child. Before he departed, he allegedly left instructions that Cleopatra should remain in power, a decision that would have far-reaching consequences for both Egypt and Rome. Cleopatra's relationship with Julius Caesar was far more than a simple love affair. It was a carefully calculated political alliance that would have profound implications for both Egypt and Rome. In 46 BCE, Cleopatra traveled to Rome with Caesarion, staying at Caesar's villa outside the city. Her presence in Rome was a bold statement, a foreign queen, the ruler of a wealthy kingdom, openly associating with Rome's most powerful man. This was unprecedented in Roman society, where foreign rulers were typically viewed with suspicion and distrust. Cleopatra's arrival in Rome caused a sensation. Romans were fascinated by this exotic queen who spoke their language fluently and engaged in intellectual discussions with Caesar. She represented everything Rome was not: sophisticated, wealthy, and ruled by a woman. Her presence challenged Roman notions of power, gender, and cultural superiority. For Caesar, Cleopatra represented an opportunity to realize his vision of a Roman empire that encompassed the entire Mediterranean world. Egypt's wealth and strategic location made it a valuable asset, and Cleopatra's intelligence and political acumen made her an ideal partner. Caesar may have even considered making Alexandria the capital of his empire rather than Rome. But not everyone in Rome was pleased with Caesar's relationship with Cleopatra. Many senators saw her as a threat to Roman traditions and values. They feared that Caesar was becoming too powerful, too autocratic, and too influenced by this foreign queen. Their suspicions were confirmed when Caesar erected a golden statue of Cleopatra in the Temple of Venus Genetrix, associating her with the goddess and with Caesar's own divine ancestry. These fears came to a head on March 15, 44 BCE, the Ides of March, when Caesar was assassinated by a group of senators led by Brutus and Cassius. While Cleopatra was not directly involved in the political tensions that led to Caesar's death, her presence in Rome and her relationship with Caesar had contributed to the perception that he was becoming a king in all but name. With Caesar's death, Cleopatra's position became precarious. She had lost her most powerful protector and ally in Rome. She quickly returned to Egypt with Caesarion, determined to secure her son's future and protect Egypt from Roman domination. Back in Egypt, Cleopatra established herself as a sole ruler, having her younger brother Ptolemy XIV killed to eliminate any challenge to her authority. She positioned Caesarion as her co-ruler and heir, emphasizing his connection to Caesar. She even had coins minted depicting herself and Caesarion, presenting them as the rightful rulers of Egypt. But Cleopatra knew that Egypt's future depended on maintaining good relations with Rome. The Roman Republic was in chaos after Caesar's assassination, with his heirs and assassins vying for power. Cleopatra needed to align herself with the victor in this struggle, whoever that might be. Initially, she remained neutral in the conflict between Caesar's assassins and his successors. But when the conflict escalated into open war, Cleopatra faced a difficult choice. Should she support the conspirators who had killed Caesar, or align herself with Caesar's heirs? Her decision was made easier when Cassius, one of Caesar's assassins, demanded that she send troops and supplies to support his cause. Cleopatra delayed, claiming that Egypt was suffering from drought and famine. In reality, she was waiting to see which side would emerge victorious. Her patience was rewarded when Caesar's heir, Octavian, along with Mark Antony and Lepidus, defeated the forces of Brutus and Cassius at the Battle of Philippi in 42 BCE. The Roman world was now divided among the three victors, with Mark Antony taking control of the eastern provinces, including Egypt. Cleopatra recognized that Mark Antony would be the dominant power in the east, and she needed to secure his support. She summoned Antony to Alexandria, setting the stage for the second and most consequential of her relationships with Roman leaders. Mark Antony's arrival in Alexandria in 41 BCE marked the beginning of a relationship that would change the course of history. Like Caesar before him, Antony was captivated by Cleopatra's intelligence, charm, and political acumen. But their relationship went far beyond mere personal attraction. It was a political alliance that would ultimately contribute to the fall of the Roman Republic. Antony was a different man from Caesar. Where Caesar was calculating and strategic, Antony was impulsive and passionate. He was a brilliant military commander but lacked Caesar's political finesse. He was also deeply in debt and in need of Egypt's wealth to fund his campaigns and maintain his army. For Cleopatra, Antony represented an opportunity to secure Egypt's future and expand her influence. She understood that Rome was the dominant power in the Mediterranean, and that Egypt's survival depended on maintaining good relations with Rome. By allying herself with Antony, she hoped to create a new order in the East, with Alexandria as its capital and herself as its queen. Their relationship began as a political alliance but soon developed into something more. Cleopatra bore Antony 3 children, twins Alexander Helios and Cleopatra Selene, and another son named Ptolemy Philadelphus. These children represented the union of East and West, a new dynasty that could potentially dominate the Mediterranean world. But Cleopatra's influence over Antony went beyond their personal relationship. She advised him on political matters, provided him with the funds he needed for his campaigns, and supported his military ambitions. In return, Antony granted her territories in the eastern Mediterranean, including parts of Syria, Lebanon, and Cilicia. This arrangement alarmed many in Rome. They saw Antony as becoming too powerful, too autocratic, and too influenced by this foreign queen. Their fears were confirmed when Antony divorced his Roman wife Octavia, who was also Octavian's sister, and married Cleopatra in an Egyptian ceremony. The situation came to a head in 34 BCE when Antony held the donations of Alexandria in a grand ceremony. In front of a crowd, he distributed Roman territories to Cleopatra and their children. He declared Caesarion to be Caesar's true heir, despite Octavian's claims to that title. He also granted Cleopatra and their children royal titles and territories that were traditionally under Roman control. This was a direct challenge to Octavian and to Roman authority. By giving away Roman territories to a foreign queen and her children, Antony was essentially creating a rival empire in the East, with Cleopatra at its head. This was unacceptable to Octavian and to many in Rome who saw it as a betrayal of Roman interests. Octavian used Antony's actions to turn public opinion against him. He portrayed Antony as having gone native, as having abandoned Roman values for the luxuries of the East and the charms of an exotic queen. He also emphasized the threat that Cleopatra posed to Rome, suggesting that she intended to move the capital of the empire from Rome to Alexandria. The propaganda war between Octavian and Antony escalated, with both sides vying for support in Rome and throughout the empire. Octavian proved to be the more skilled politician, gradually turning the Senate and the people of Rome against Antony and Cleopatra. The conflict came to a head in 31 BCE when Octavian declared war on Cleopatra. This was a strategic move. By declaring war on Cleopatra rather than Antony, Octavian framed the conflict as a defense of Rome against a foreign threat rather than a civil war between Romans. The decisive battle took place at Actium off the coast of Greece. Antony and Cleopatra's forces were defeated by Octavian's fleet, in large part due to Antony's poor military decisions and Cleopatra's premature retreat. The defeat was catastrophic for Antony and Cleopatra, effectively ending their hopes of creating a new Eastern empire. After their defeat at Actium, Antony and Cleopatra returned to Alexandria, where they made their last stand. Octavian pursued them, determined to eliminate his rivals once and for all. In Alexandria, Antony and Cleopatra attempted to regroup and plan their next move. But their situation was hopeless. Octavian's forces were closing in, and support for Antony and Cleopatra was evaporating. Many of their allies abandoned them, recognizing that Octavian was now the undisputed master of the Roman world. In a desperate attempt to save herself and her children, Cleopatra sent treasures to Octavian, hoping to negotiate a settlement. But Octavian was not interested in negotiation. He wanted Cleopatra alive to parade her in his triumph in Rome, a humiliation that would demonstrate his complete victory over his rivals. As Octavian's forces entered Alexandria, Antony made one last stand. He led his troops into battle, but they were quickly defeated. Believing that Cleopatra had already betrayed him to Octavian, Antony took his own life, falling on his sword. When he learned that Cleopatra was still alive, he had himself carried to her, where he died in her arms. Cleopatra was now alone, facing certain humiliation at the hands of Octavian. Rather than allow herself to be paraded through the streets of Rome as a captive, she chose to end her own life. According to tradition, she had an aspi, a poisonous snake, smuggled into her mausoleum in a basket of figs and allowed it to bite her, dying from the snake's venom. With Cleopatra's death, the Ptolemaic dynasty came to an end, and Egypt became a province of the Roman Empire. Caesarion, Cleopatra's son by Caesar, was executed on Octavian's orders, eliminating any potential rival to Octavian's power. Cleopatra's other children by Antony were spared and taken to Rome, where they were raised by Octavia, Antony's former wife. But the consequences of Cleopatra's actions extended far beyond Egypt and her own family. Her relationships with Caesar and Antony had contributed to the fall of the Roman Republic and the rise of the Roman Empire under Octavian, who would take the name Augustus and become Rome's first emperor. The Roman Republic, with its system of checks and balances, its emphasis on civic virtue, and its tradition of shared power, had been weakened by years of civil war and political instability. Cleopatra's relationships with Caesar and Antony had exacerbated these tensions, contributing to the perception that Rome's leaders were becoming too powerful, too autocratic, and too influenced by foreign interests. Octavian used this perception to his advantage, portraying himself as the defender of Roman traditions and values against the threat posed by Antony and Cleopatra. After defeating them, he consolidated power in his own hands, gradually transforming Rome from a republic to an empire. The Roman Empire that emerged under Augustus was very different from the Roman Republic that had existed before Cleopatra's birth. Power was concentrated in the hands of one man, the emperor, rather than being shared among the Senate and the people of Rome. The traditional Roman values of republicanism and civic virtue were replaced by imperial autocracy and the cult of the emperor. Cleopatra had not intended to bring about the fall of the Roman Republic. Her goal had always been to secure Egypt's independence and expand her own power. But in pursuing these goals, she had inadvertently contributed to one of the most significant political transformations in Western history. The legacy of Cleopatra is complex and often misunderstood. She was not merely a seductress who used her beauty to manipulate powerful men. She was a brilliant strategist, a cunning diplomat, and a visionary leader who understood power in a way few of her contemporaries did. She was also a woman who dared to challenge the dominant power of her time, using every tool at her disposal to protect her kingdom and secure her legacy. As we've examined Cleopatra's life and her relationships with Caesar and Antony, a more complex picture emerges than the traditional portrayal of her as a seductress who destroyed men with her beauty. The shocking truth about Cleopatra is that she was far more than a beautiful woman. She was a brilliant political strategist who understood power in a way few of her contemporaries did. Cleopatra's relationships with Caesar and Antony were not mere love affairs. They were carefully calculated political moves designed to protect Egypt and expand her influence. She used her intelligence, her charm, and her understanding of human nature to form alliances with the most powerful men in Rome, hoping to create a new order in the Mediterranean world with Egypt at its center. But these relationships had unintended consequences. By aligning herself with Caesar and Antony, Cleopatra inadvertently contributed to the political tensions that were tearing the Roman Republic apart. Her presence in Rome and her influence over these powerful men fueled the perception that Rome's leaders were becoming too autocratic and too influenced by foreign interests. The donations of Alexandria, in particular, were a catastrophic miscalculation. By accepting Roman territories from Antony and allowing him to declare her children as rulers of these territories, Cleopatra played into Octavian's hands, giving him the perfect pretext to declare war and turn Roman public opinion against her and Antony. The defeat at Actium and the subsequent deaths of Antony and Cleopatra marked the end of the Ptolemaic dynasty and the beginning of Roman rule over Egypt. But more significantly, they marked the end of the Roman Republic and the beginning of the Roman Empire under Augustus. The shocking truth is that Cleopatra, in her efforts to protect Egypt and secure her own power, inadvertently contributed to one of the most significant political transformations in Western history. The Roman Republic, with its system of shared power and its emphasis on civic virtue, gave way to the Roman Empire, with power concentrated in the hands of one man. Cleopatra's legacy is not that of a seductress who destroyed men with her beauty, but of a brilliant strategist who dared to challenge the dominant power of her time. She was a woman who used every tool at her disposal: intelligence, charm, political acumen, and yes, her beauty, to protect her kingdom and secure her legacy. In doing so, she changed the course of Western civilization. Cleopatra VII, the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic Kingdom of Egypt, is one of history's most fascinating and misunderstood figures. For centuries, she has been portrayed as a seductress who used her beauty to manipulate powerful men, leading to their downfall. But as we've seen, the truth about Cleopatra is far more complex and far more significant than this traditional portrayal suggests. Cleopatra was a brilliant strategist, a cunning diplomat, and a visionary leader who understood power in a way few of her contemporaries did. She spoke 9 languages, was educated in mathematics, philosophy, oratory, and politics, and ruled Egypt for 21 years in a time of great political upheaval. Her relationships with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony were not mere love affairs. They were carefully calculated political moves designed to protect Egypt and expand her influence. She used her intelligence, her charm, and her understanding of human nature to form alliances with the most powerful men in Rome, hoping to create a new order in the Mediterranean world with Egypt at its center. But these relationships had unintended consequences. By aligning herself with Caesar and Antony, Cleopatra inadvertently contributed to the political tensions that were tearing the Roman Republic apart. Her influence over these powerful men fueled the perception that Rome's leaders were becoming too autocratic and too influenced by foreign interests. The defeat at Actium and the subsequent deaths of Antony and Cleopatra marked the end of the Ptolemaic dynasty and the beginning of Roman rule over Egypt. But more significantly, they marked the end of the Roman Republic and the beginning of the Roman Empire under Augustus. Cleopatra's legacy is not that of a seductress who destroyed men with her beauty, but of a brilliant strategist who dared to challenge the dominant power of her time. She was a woman who used every tool at her disposal to protect her kingdom and secure her legacy. In doing so, she changed the course of Western civilization. The story of Cleopatra challenges us to look beyond traditional narratives and simplistic portrayals. It reminds us that history is often more complex than the stories we tell about it, and that the actions of individuals, even those operating from a position of relative weakness, can have profound and unintended consequences. Cleopatra's life also raises important questions about power, gender, and cultural identity. As a woman ruling in a man's world, as a Greek ruling over Egyptians, as a client ruler dealing with the dominant power of Rome, Cleopatra navigated multiple identities and power dynamics with remarkable skill. In the end, Cleopatra's story is not just about one woman's ambition or the fall of an ancient kingdom. It's about the complex interplay of power, politics, and personality that shapes history. It's about how individuals, even those operating from positions of relative weakness, can influence the course of events in ways they never intended. And it's about how the stories we tell about historical figures, particularly women, are often shaped by the biases and agendas of those who came after them. The real Cleopatra was far more than the seductress of legend. She was a brilliant strategist, a visionary leader, and a woman who changed the course of Western civilization. What other historical figures have been misunderstood or misrepresented in popular culture? And how might our understanding of history change if we looked beyond the traditional narratives? These are questions worth pondering as we continue to explore the fascinating tapestry of human history.